The night my wife asked for an open marriage started like any other Tuesday. I came home carrying her favorite takeout, expecting another quiet dinner after a long day at work. Instead, I found Emily sitting at the dining table with 2 glasses of wine she hadn't touched. Her expression wasn't angry or guilty. It was strangely rehearsed, as if she practiced every word in front of a mirror. Before I could even sit down, she looked me in the eyes and said, "I'm bored, Daniel. I love you, but I don't think one person is enough anymore." My heart froze. I laughed, convinced it had to be a joke. She never smiled back. She explained everything with terrifying calmness. She claimed modern couples were redefining marriage and that we were simply holding ourselves back. According to her, opening our relationship would make us stronger because we'd choose each other every day instead of feeling trapped. She insisted it wasn't because she'd met someone else. She was just tired of routine. I listened without interrupting, watching the woman I'd shared 12 years with describe our marriage as though it were an outdated subscription she wanted upgrade. Every memory we had built together suddenly felt cheap. Yet somehow, the hardest part wasn't hearing her words. It was realizing she believed I'd actually agree. For nearly an hour, she tried to convince me. She showed me articles, podcasts, and social media posts praising open marriages as the future of healthy relationships. She kept repeating that nothing between us had to change. We'd still live together, eat together, celebrate holidays together. We would simply be free. When I finally asked if she'd already chosen someone, she hesitated for less than a second before saying no. That tiny pause told me everything. Someone was already waiting. Maybe a coworker. Maybe an old boyfriend. Maybe someone she'd been texting while sitting beside me every evening. I didn't need proof anymore. I had instinct, and instinct rarely lies. I surprised both of us with my answer. Instead of yelling or begging, I simply nodded. "Okay," I said quietly. "If that's truly what you want, I won't stop you." Relief flooded her face, so quickly it almost made me sick. She rushed around the table to hug me, thanking me for being mature and understanding. I hugged her back because I knew something she didn't. The marriage she wanted to change had already ended in my mind. The moment she valued curiosity over commitment, she stopped being my partner. From that second forward, I began making decisions not as a husband trying to save his marriage, but as a man preparing for his future. The following days were painfully revealing. Emily suddenly became happier than she'd been in years. She started spending extra time getting ready before work, bought expensive perfume she'd never worn for me, and smiled at her phone every few minutes. She claimed she was meeting friends after work more often, returning home long after midnight with stories that sounded rehearsed. I never questioned her. Instead, I focused on myself. I returned to the gym, reconnected with old friends, updated my wardrobe, and quietly scheduled meetings with a financial advisor and a divorce attorney. I wasn't planning revenge. I was preparing for reality. Exactly 1 week later, Emily casually mentioned she'd be spending the weekend with someone named Ryan. She acted as though she were announcing a grocery trip. "Don't wait up," she said with a cheerful smile before leaving. I watched her car disappear down the street, then walked back into the silent house. The loneliness hit me harder than I expected, but so did something else, clarity. I realized I'd spent years making sacrifices to protect a marriage that only one of us still respected. As I stood in the empty living room, I made myself one promise. If she ever realized what she'd thrown away, I would never let guilt convince me to rebuild something she had willingly broken. The second week passed faster than I expected. Emily barely seemed interested in the life we had once shared. Every conversation revolved around how liberating her new lifestyle felt. She laughed more than she had in years, constantly checking her phone for messages that made her grin. I never asked about Ryan again because I no longer needed answers. Instead, I quietly finalized paperwork, separated our finances where legally possible, and rented a small apartment across town without telling her. The strange thing was that the more freedom she celebrated, the more peace I found in letting her drift further away. Then, almost overnight, something changed. Emily stopped humming while getting ready for work. She no longer smiled at her phone. Instead, I noticed frustrated sighs, unanswered calls, and long periods of silence. One evening, she stormed into the house, threw her purse onto the couch, and disappeared into the bedroom without saying a word. Through the thin walls, I could hear muffled crying, followed by angry phone conversations that ended with the same sentence every time. "You promised." I didn't ask questions. The answers were already revealing themselves without my help. 3 days later, I came home to find her sitting alone in the dark kitchen. Her makeup had smeared beneath tired eyes, and the confidence she had carried only weeks earlier had completely vanished. After several minutes of silence, she finally admitted that Ryan wasn't interested in building a future with her. According to him, the excitement had disappeared once things became emotionally complicated. He had started seeing someone else, someone even newer. Emily whispered that she felt used, disposable, and ashamed. I listened respectfully, but I couldn't ignore the painful irony. The same emptiness she described was exactly what I had felt the night she called our marriage boring. The following morning, I handed her an envelope while she drank coffee in complete silence. She looked confused until she opened it. Inside were the divorce papers I had signed the previous evening. Her hands immediately began shaking. "Daniel, you said you accepted this," she whispered. I nodded. "I accepted your choice," I replied calmly. "But you never asked whether I wanted to stay married after that choice." Tears streamed down her face as she realized acceptance had never meant agreement. She had mistaken my dignity for endless patience, and now there was nothing left to negotiate. That afternoon, I packed a few boxes and moved into my new apartment. It wasn't luxurious, but it felt peaceful in a way our house hadn't for months. For the first time in years, silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was healing. I focused on work, spent weekends hiking with old friends, and slowly rebuilt a life that belonged entirely to me. Every morning became a reminder that self-respect often feels lonely before it feels liberating. I wasn't celebrating the end of my marriage. I was simply refusing to let someone else's choices define the rest of my life. Exactly 21 days after Emily had first asked for an open marriage, someone knocked on my apartment door just after sunset. When I opened it, she was standing there wearing the same blue jacket she'd worn on the night everything began. Her eyes were swollen from crying, and her confident posture had completely disappeared. Before I could speak, she broke down in tears. She begged me to come home, saying she'd made the biggest mistake of her life. She insisted she finally understood what loyalty, safety, and unconditional love actually meant. Between sobs, she promised to end every outside relationship forever if I would just give her one more chance. I looked at the woman I had once imagined growing old beside and felt something I never expected: compassion without desire. I wasn't angry anymore, but I also wasn't the man she had left 21 days earlier. That version of me had disappeared the moment she decided our vows were negotiable. I quietly told her, "I forgive you, Emily." Carrying hate would only keep me trapped in the past. But forgiveness doesn't erase consequences, and love cannot survive where trust has been treated as optional. She cried harder, realizing there would be no dramatic reunion, no miraculous second beginning. I gently closed the door, not out of revenge, but because some endings deserve to remain endings. As I walked back into my apartment, I understood the greatest lesson of my life. People often discover the value of what they had only after they willingly traded it away, but by then, the person they left behind has already learned to live without them.